Hi, I'm Antonio Mora. America is facing a crisis of a magnitude the country has rarely seen. It's a triple whammy: the worst public health challenge in a century, what may be the sharpest economic decline in U.S. history, and the protests, violence, injustice, and fear that have emerged from deaths relating to America's original sin, racism. As George W. Bush wrote this past week, the doctrine and habits of racial superiority, which once nearly split our country, still threaten our union. The killing of George Floyd may have been the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to anger over police brutality against African Americans, with Floyd's death representing the most outrageous of tragedies in a long history of them. From a personal perspective, what limited discrimination I have faced as a Latino male, especially when I was younger, pales in comparison to what African Americans constantly endure. It is impossible for me or other non-blacks to understand that essential reality, no matter how hard we try to put ourselves in their shoes. But most Americans of all races should be able to agree on some basic points, despite what some of the extremes might argue, even at a time when we may be more severely polarized than ever. Most of us are angry and appalled because Floyd's killing was an immoral affront to human decency, a violation of the most basic of human rights. We reject those who try to justify the violence against Floyd by arguing he may have committed a crime and that he had used illegal drugs. He could have consumed a whole meth lab, and nothing in his behavior remotely justified the actions of those officers. We are outraged that police departments, police review boards, and police unions allow bad apples to stay on the streets. How could the officer who knelt on Floyd's neck be patrolling when 18 complaints had been filed against him and he'd been reprimanded? Worse yet, how could he have been a training officer? However, we know the large majority of the men and women who serve in uniform are dedicated to protecting us and deserve our respect and gratitude. We reject police brutality, but are equally outraged at the violence some so-called protesters have unleashed on thousands of injured officers. We celebrate peaceful protesters, especially those who have become peacekeepers and stopped those who would become violent. We celebrate police officers who express their solidarity with demonstrators and in doing so diffuse protests. But we condemn the few who do it for propaganda purposes and then disrespect protesters' rights. We reject and demand accountability for those who violate the Constitution that has guided this country to be the world's greatest, despite its faults. We acknowledge racism, but don't believe America is racist at its core, and believe America has strived and is still striving to live up to the ideal that all of us are created equal. We believe in the right to peacefully protest, but we reject the rioting and violence that has terrorized cities. Wanton looting is not liberation, and rioting is not some sort of benign and acceptable rebellion. We worry about how the looting is creating a vicious cycle of destruction, arresting progress in victimized neighborhoods that will take forever to recover, something that may create conditions that could lead to another cycle of violence in the future. Rioting hurts everyone, from big corporations to mom and pop stores, but especially inner city neighborhoods. We do not believe it is racist to want law and order, but law and order should not be an excuse to oppress anyone. We believe in freedom of the press, and that the media needs to cover the demonstrations, to tell the stories of what is happening on the streets and about discrimination and abuse against minorities. We are furious at attacks on reporters, be it from police or violent protesters. But we are also outraged at how some in the media have sensationalized the protests and how some pundits have crossed the line to justify the violence. Righteous anger is no excuse for destruction and stealing. Finally, we demand the reform of American institutions that allow injustices and racism. In these polarized times, some on the left will almost surely call something I just said to be racist or at least insensitive. Some on the right will say I'm a bleeding heart, typical media liberal. However, I'm confident most Americans agree with what I just said. They are outraged by Floyd's death, back the right of all Americans to protest peacefully, want police brutality punished swiftly and severely, and believe change is needed immediately, while simultaneously supporting good police officers and condemning looting, rioting, and violence of any kind. I'll end with words from former President Bush. Lasting peace in our communities requires truly equal justice, and achieving justice for all is the duty of all.